important point. As if anything was important. Okay. Well, guys, welcome to what is here Saturday morning Sangha. It's Friday evening for most of you. And Todd, welcome. This is the first time that you've been here.
Thank you.
And you've made the point about distance. And so one of the things that we can start talking about is that Western Buddhism is suffering under a situation that the people in the time of the Buddha didn't have. When the Buddha spoke in the language that he spoke, he was intentionally careful to speak in a language that people understood. And so the teaching of the Dhamma was clear and evident, and has been clear and evident to all of the countries that it's gone to, in the sense of it went to China, it went to Burma, Thailand, Lanka, to Tibet, eventually to Japan and Korea. And when it arrived quite well, in the sense that whatever the original teachings of the Buddha was, that the people in the time of the Buddha understood, that was what was distributed. It wouldn't get into another culture and another language. A lot of misunderstandings happen. In fact, there's a movie I've seen, or at least seen bits and pieces of. It's about I think it's about an American in Japan, and the name of the movie is Lost in Translation. Guess what? Buddhism and the teaching of the Buddha gets lost in translation. And there's a number of words in the Pali that, if you understand the words correctly, and take the teachings of the Buddha from the perspective of what the words actually mean, then it's an easy thing. The problem is that we use language trying to translate out of the teachings of the Buddha himself into a language that we already understand. And I don't mean English as opposed to the Pali, I mean a mindset. And our culture has a mindset of delayed gratification. Everything that we talk about has to do with delayed gratification. Eat your peas and carrots before you have your dessert. They started off in childhood. Do your homework and clean up your room, and then you can play on your cell phone. Okay? And this keeps going on and on and on. Work is more important than play. And so our culture is deeply, deeply wrapped up into that, and it's been that way for basically centuries. Oh, that's the way that the mentality is. And so when there was another issue, and that is that when Buddhism spread around Asia, it was spread around Asia by those who knew what the teachings were. That was not the case for Western Buddhism. Buddhism was spread in the West by Westerners who had no clue about what they were spreading around. It was almost like that they had a beautiful, ornate puzzle box, that the puzzle box itself, unopened, was marvelous and brilliant enough that that's what they was passing around, without even understanding that that puzzle box is a puzzle box that can be opened, and the real prize is on the inside. Okay. And so that inside is not hundreds of miles away. It's right there inside that box. Or another way of thinking about it is that we have translated things wrongly. An example of that is the Pali word samadhi does not translate into the word concentration. It's very problematic. Another one is the one that you were already kind of mentioning, and that is when we talk about the Eightfold Noble Path, that's a misconception. because the idea of a path is a destination, a footpath, a bicycle path, a path to nirvana, a path to there, here, there, and yon, whether it's a highway or a weeded old jungle path. And that the real translation, or a much better translation for the Pali word of Magga, is the word method. The Eightfold Noble Method. To open that box, you put the key in, you turn the crank, you turn the knob, and you open the box. That's all there is to it. But Western Buddhism says that box is so far away, and nobody's got the key. And so I have actually heard people, this was years ago, and I assume that it's still common. Maybe you guys have heard it. The idea that there hasn't been anyone enlightened for centuries. Have you ever heard any of that kind of stuff? What that means is the guy who said that says, I have been looking very hard and I have not found anyone that I think is enlightened enough for me to claim that he's enlightened, especially since I have my own personal view of what the word enlightenment is. And guess what? Everybody's got their own personal view of what enlightenment is. And it's almost always way out there, way far away, a distance. And that we've got to work really hard and struggle to get there. The reality is that we have been working and struggling hard our whole lives and have not gotten anywhere with that. But we've been told that that's the way to do it. You got to keep working. You got to keep struggling. Language like, if first you don't succeed, try again. This is the way that people are taught in the West. And that it's been attributed to Einstein, but we're not really sure of who said this. But the quote is that doing the same thing over and over again and expecting new results is a good definition of insanity. Mm-hmm. And I use that remark, if at first you don't succeed, try again, with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa. He laughed. He said, no, if you're not succeeding, look at what you're doing. Now, look at what you're doing actually is, in fact, the Eightfold Noble Path with a slight little change. And that is, look at what you're doing and then make a change to that right now. That basically the enlightenment is a change of attitude. And we can change our attitude. In fact, we change our attitude about all kinds of things on a regular basis. Look how many people will vote for one political party this time and another political party next time, right? Mm-hmm. So we go around changing our mind about things all the time, and it's possible for us to change our mind about things that are what we would call deep-seated. But another way of talking about it is that it's not so much deep-seated as that it's been old, started when we were in childhood, and then we repeated it over and over and over and over again until it really got ground in. It's sort of like if you keep painting your house, every month you paint that house, but you keep painting it with the same paint that you had, but you paint it over and over again, hoping that the color of the house will change. And all we're doing is laying more layers of paint on the house. And what possibly needs to be done then is we need to, in order to get a good paint job, we need to scrape off all of that old paint that keeps buckling and boiling and whatnot like that. And that's the work that has to be done. It's not the new paint job. It's that the old paint job is interfering more with our new paint job. Mm. And so this is what the practice of ānāpānasati is the practice of inspecting that old paint job and then making changes to it. If you see it bubbling here or cracking there, you just scrape that part off and get this thing ready for a better paint job. That's all there is to it. And there's many teachings that Westerners don't understand that is actually part and parcel of the practice. Zen, for instance, will tell the Zen master will say, just sit. You're already enlightened. Just sit. And yet most of the people who practice Zen say that I had to practice just sitting for 20 years before I realized that I was now okay. I'd learned to sit, and that was okay. And we could have changed our attitude about I was okay, I was already enlightened, and now I can just sit. There's also the story about the Zen student who walked into the Dhamma hall and saw the old teacher sitting over there in the corner, and they went over and says, teacher, are you meditating to become enlightened? The old man opened one eye and says, I'm just sitting here because I'm already enlightened. All right, so that's the way to look, that we actually are sitting and practicing to be enlightened right here, right now. It's really amazing that people would, you can actually imagine that if anything, enlightenment is the skill of not going dark. And so it's a skill to be developed. And if it is a skill to be developed, then that means that people are going to sit in their meditation hall year after year after year, practicing day after day after day in darkness, hoping somehow that the light's going to shine. They don't know where the light is. They don't know where the light switch is. They don't know the source of power, and yet they think that it's going to turn it on magically. The story would be that the karma machine waltzes into the room, checks his list off, says, oh, well, you've done 30,000 hours of meditation here. And he takes the Shakti pot and he pops you on it and says, now you can have some bliss. You put in the hours, okay? How Western mentality is that? And yet a lot of people will on Reddit will brag how many hours of meditation or how many years they've been practicing or whatnot like that. And it seems that there are then two jobs possible here. One job is to take the students who have already developed the skills or some skills and help them to improve those skills while removing a lot of the knowledge that they have had, which is, doing a lot of scraping of paint, because a lot of the Buddhism that they've learned is just a bunch of old paint of the wrong color. But the other side would be those who don't know anything about the teachings of the Buddha. And now we can start fresh, but then they don't have any painting skills. And so one job is different than the other, but they wind up being basically the same. And that is that we need to pay attention to what's happening in this present moment, rather than planning on the future. That's the real teaching of the Buddha, is that everything happens now. That this is such a profound and important teaching that the Buddha referred to himself as Tathagata. Have you ever heard of that word, Tathagata? It also comes out of the two words of Tathata and Ga. Now, the word Ga is the same word in English as go. But we can also use the understanding of coming and going as just a direction, as opposed to the actual effort of coming and going. And the word tathata actually translates badly in English as the word thusness. Mm-hmm. But the reality of the word is that this is it. This is here now. I mean, this what's happening, that's it. Okay, this is it. So what the word Tathagata means is the one who is in the here now. And is translated badly as thus gone one. and nobody understands what thus gone one means.
Right.
But if you look at it closely, the one who is gone to this, the one who is here now, he's not in the past, he's not in the future, he's not in some other location mentally. If he is in New York, he's thinking about the vicinity that he's in New York. He's not thinking about Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So here and now is the actual teachings of the Buddha. And there's an actual practice that we have to bring us to that. And the practice is the Eightfold Noble Method that we practice. We practice a method. And that in the practice of that method, we develop skills. And one of the important skills is to learn to be satisfied right now at this present moment. Whatever is happening, whatever small success that we have, we should look at that rather than the failure. So if we have 100% of badness, then we've got none good. And so we could just sit there and complain. But if we have just a tiny little bit, just 1%, then we can start focusing on that, this useful, valuable, and wholesome, and let that build as a skill, as opposed to, oh, this 1% is not good enough. Because look at all the 99%. Look at all the work that needs to be done, rather than appreciating that things are okay right now. That 100% unsatisfactory is 100% unsatisfactory. But 1% satisfaction versus 99% unsatisfaction depends upon what you're looking at. If you're looking at the 99%, then everything looks bad. If you're looking at the 1% and only looking at the 1%, then hey, that's pretty good. So that means that we have to remember to stop looking at the bad stuff, which we've been trained to do. That's part of our culture. Is you've got to improve, you've got to make things better. This is what the word good, better, and best, and bad, worse, and worse are all about. Is making these comparisons. This isn't good because that's better. This used to be good until I found out about better, and now good's not good enough. So what we're going to do is begin to turn around those comparisons, which we can also think of as critical thinking. And we think critically, oh, 99, 1, no. We're going to change that around to 1's good enough. 1%'s okay. That's good enough. Better than 0. And so we begin to work with it from that perspective of right now, things are okay, even at just the 1% level. So another analogy of that would be, imagine that you've got a seed. That seed is the seed of a tree. And if you plant that seed and grow that tree, it will have more seeds. And within 100 or so years, you'll have an entire forest. But if you give that seed to a meditator, you know what he's going to do with that seed? He's going to cut it open looking for the forest. What we need to do with that seed instead is to plant it and nourish it and give it sunshine and water. Let things be juicy. Okay. Well, that's actually then the practice, just how you would nurture a seed for it to grow into a tree is exactly the same things that we need to do to have that seed of wisdom, knowledge, and good cheer grow within each one of us. That if we criticize the seed, that's like cutting it open looking for where's the tree. What we need to do instead is to nurture the seed, put some sunshine on it, allow it to grow, let things be safe and secure. All right. So you probably heard that there is a word that is very, very common, almost so common that it made it into English language that comes out of the Pali, and that is the word dukkha. You've probably
Mhm.
heard that word, and it is almost always, even by mistake when I'm talking too fast, we'll translate it into the word suffering.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean suffering. You can tell, in fact, that the people who originally did the translation chose the word suffering because of their own background. And so Christians, they love that word suffer. I mean, they've got a big dude who really knows how to suffer, and he's taught them how to do it. And so Christianity has a whole lot of things to make people suffer. They've got hell, and they've got the rapture and Armageddon and big gods with great big fists and all kinds of things like that to keep people afraid and intimidated so they can be bold. That's what it's really all about. What capitalism itself is a system of exploitation. Who can exploit whom and take advantage of them?
Totally.
And so the word dukkha does not translate well into the word suffering because it misses the point almost completely. Christianity has it is that if you suffer enough, then something will happen so that you gain mercy. Enough is enough, okay?
Mhm.
It's like you have to wait for the pot to boil all over before you turn the heat off. The point is, you can turn the heat off anytime. You don't have to wait for it to boil over. So, in this regard, we can learn then to practice ānāpānasati in the way of recognizing what's happening in the moment, and then make a change to that in the moment, right here, right now. And if we continue to do that, if we continue to take 100% darkness and put 1% light in, and we keep doing that over and over again, we develop skills so that it becomes 1.1%. And it begins to grow that way because we develop skills. So this is the basic teaching of the Buddha. And this, in that regard, the word dukkha doesn't mean suffering, because none of you are suffering right now. No one. I don't know anyone who actually suffers unless they're really, really, really worried about something, and then the suffering comes. But they got into that state of worry a little bit at a time, and that little bit was a little bit of dissatisfaction. And while no one around is suffering, everybody around is dissatisfied with something or another, or perhaps dissatisfied with a whole lot of stuff. I mean, look how many people are dissatisfied with Putin. And last week they were dissatisfied with Trump. And before that, they were dissatisfied with Biden. And before that, they were dissatisfied with COVID. And so we just keep going from dissatisfaction to dissatisfaction to dissatisfaction, rather than looking at the process of moving from one dissatisfying thing to the next dissatisfying thing. And we begin to see that we can change, but we have to practice that change. And this is what the Eightfold Noble Method is really all about, is the practice of looking at what we're doing right here and the now, recognizing that we could make things a little better right now. And let's do that. Let's make that change. Let's not leave things the way that they are. Let's make some small, some slight improvement. And by doing that, we're beginning to change things from being unsatisfying and unsatisfactory into becoming satisfying or satisfactory. Well, hello, Corey. I notice you've been lurking. You got your hand up now. Your mic is off. Your mic is off. Your mic is still off. There you go.
It'll come off sooner or later.
There you go. Yeah.
So I was thinking about adaptation, and because adaptation seems to be this concept that is like kind of has a positive tone, right? but essentially I feel like there's some connection there to dukkha, right? Dukkha doesn't fully satisfy, or it's dissatisfactory, or it doesn't create lasting satisfaction, right? And if we think about it, that principle of adaptation is something that we notice all the time, right? We call it tolerance when you have like some kind of like a tolerance to caffeine. We're adapting to caffeine. The satisfaction that we get from caffeine, it doesn't last very long. We adapt to it, right? This principle is there in so many things. But it's interesting because dukkha, it seems very elusive and mysterious. We're kind of like, for me, I just couldn't identify what it was, and I don't think that adaptation is dukkha, right? But I think that adaptation is somewhere in that process of dukkha.
Here's a question. Do you want to adapt when you're adapting, or do you want to not adapt when you're adapting?
Well, I don't adapt at all. It's a natural process, but
I'm not
I don't
asking
really.
about natural processes. I'm asking about when that adaptation is happening. Do you like the adaptation is happening? Or when the adaptation is happening, you don't like what's happening?
It's half and half, because at first it's really nice to get stronger and adapt, but then it's really kind of stinky when you don't like caffeine, when caffeine doesn't really do anything for you anymore. So there's a
Well,
certain
let's use a bigger
like
one
prep
because
up
that's a
and
little
down.
bit subtle. How about adapting to getting arrested?
That's a pretty bad one. I'm not going to want to really do that one. But then again, if
Well,
you
wait a
adapt to
minute.
it, it's
You
not so
might
bad.
have, it might be a case where you might get arrested. You just don't know what the future is going to be. So it might be wise for you to get the skills necessary so that you can, in fact, handle whatever you've got to adapt to and handle it well rather than handling it badly. So going back to the original question, it's not about whether there is adaptations to be done or not. The question is, are you going to do the adaptations satisfied? Are you going to be doing the adaptations dissatisfied? Your choice.
Yeah, I was just trying to point out to people, it seems like that adaptation is something that we all know and we're aware of. We've experienced it before. It's a very easy experience to grasp. And dukkha
Right.
seems
That's why I
hard.
don't have to do anything with that, is because we already know that you guys have been adapting your whole lives. You adapted to first grade, you adapted to a pencil, you adapted to all kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
But many of the students, when they were adapting to the pencil, they didn't like that pencil at all. And now whenever they write, their hands hurt because they're really holding to that pencil. Okay.
Yeah.
And others, they adapt to the pencil and they do it happily, and now they can become calligraphers or artists.
Right. So like everything, it's good and bad.
No, no, everything is a matter of attitude. There is no good or bad.
I guess
Everything is a matter of
what I'm
your attitude. If you don't like it, you'll think it's bad. If you do like it, you'll think it's good. That's an ignorant process that we all have to on a regular basis. And it's how we feel. By the way, take the hand signal down.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Todd, good to see you back again. Yes, Robert, you've got your hand up.
Yeah. So I find it's interesting that one of the adaptations that seems to take place during this practice is an increased sensitivity to dukkha in more subtle ways than we might have seen it before. I feel like
When you look at what you're doing is dukkha. And when you begin to look at what you're doing, you're beginning to see that what I'm doing is not satisfying to me. Maybe I can make a change so that what I'm doing is satisfying. And we can do that by putting whatever we're adapting to in the moment back down, because we don't have to adapt to it. That's one thing. If we recognize that what we're doing is painful and harmful, then we can stop doing that. So it's really not about adaptation. Adaptation is just going to happen. An example of that is that you move into a city that's got a lot of fog and pollution, and you moved off of an island where the air is. You can adapt to that new air, but most people won't like it. Very few people would like to move out of clean, fresh air environment into a dirty, polluted city. All right, so it doesn't matter about what we have to adapt to. It has to do with whether we like the adaptation or not. Now, this is the major teaching of the Buddha. This is a teaching about paticca that is an important quality of the path, and that we can teach this basically in several different ways. One would be the natural way, which is the one that I do tend to do it with. And then the other one is the organized way of actually teaching paticca. This step leads to that step, leads to that step, leads to that step, which is one of the ways of teaching it. But another way of teaching it is to see right here, right now, that one of those aspects of paticca is happening in this point, Corey, about the point that if we do adapt or not adapt is not the question. It's that whether we like doing that adaptation or don't like it. And if we don't like it and don't like it ignorantly, then we're going to be suffering. We can also not like it, but not like it wisely. In other words, a mother can not like the child being naughty, and she can tease the child about it, or she can not like the child being naughty, and she can get really uptight and angry and fuss and punish the child. And that just seems to be the normal way that we're doing things. So the mother did adapt to the child, but she adapted to the child's naughty behavior in one way because it was okay. Children are naughty. Let's teach them. And this is a wonderful learning experience. Or we can be dissatisfied with the child being naughty. And then we can get angry and uptight and make things even far worse than they were before. So it's not about whether we have to adapt or not, because you've got to adapt to all kinds of things. That's what life is all about. Everything is in constant change. Everything is in turmoil. You're going to be doing a whole lot of adapting in your life. The question is, are you going to adapt happily or are you going to adapt unhappily? Your choice. And how we get started is by adapting to ānāpānasati and at least do one thing happily. That we adapt to gladdening the mind. We adapt to then looking what we're doing, remembering to look at what we're doing. We adapt then to taking the right effort to change the mind from an unwholesome state of not liking it into a wholesome state of liking it. Now we can adapt to a stranger coming up. Mostly how we adapt to a stranger is by being both curious and wary, because we don't know who he is. Okay. But we almost never decide from the get-go when we meet a stranger to be happy and joyful and glad to meet him. The only people who can do that are the ones who were trained as salesmen. Everybody else is weary and doesn't want to meet a stranger because they might be dangerous. So to finish off with this question, Corey, let's not look at what we have to adapt to, but let's look at the process we go through in our habit of how we adapt to things. Because what you were adapting to 4 or 5 years ago, and then 4 years ago, you adapted to whatever you were adapting to in a frame of mind, and building that habit so that when something new has to be adapted to, you're going to react to that new adaptation the way that you reacted to it in the old days, which is that if you didn't like to adapt, then you didn't like it. Many people don't like to move, but some people get used to it. My situation, because of my dad's job, I moved from town to town about once a year. I got adapted to that. And eventually I learned to like it. In the beginning, I didn't like it so much, but I learned to like it. In some of those small southern towns that I was in, boy, I couldn't wait to get out of there, only to go to another southern town. All right, so let's finish that. Alex, you've got your hand up.
Hi, Dhammarato. So good to see you.
Ah, you've shaved.
I have shaved, yeah. I'm not the mysterious stranger anymore. Dhammarato said that I was a sinister man for having a mustache.
No, he took that. That's what he heard. That's not what I said.
I know, I'm just throwing you under the bus. I'm kidding. No, Dhammarato said is that people unknowingly, their actions and the way they think about my appearance could affect the way they approach me and basically my relationship with them based on the appearance of a mustache because of the dark features, which I could totally see that.
So, anyway, you got a question? You got your hand up.
Yeah, so my question was, when it gets to feel really good and things are really great, and the thought of I want more or this isn't enough comes up, and you keep continuously throwing it out, but it comes back. And even if you feel really good after that,
You're
it
talking
comes
about
back.
throwing out a thought.
Throwing out the unwholesome thought of I want more.
Okay.
Yeah, this isn't
Okay.
good enough. That's basically what I notice is like kind of like a plateau. Well, I'm not even going to say that. That's an unwholesome thought in and of itself. But that's something I've been noticing, that no matter how great it gets, there's like a, oh, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
So I was curious if you had any suggestions on how to ānāpānasati my way through that.
Well, there's the opposite case also, and that is that when you are told there is more, you say, no, but I'm good enough already. I just did that. That's what I used to do. I've been doing that all day. There's that side to it also. You see both sides of that?
You're talking about what I say with you when things aren't going well.
Well, you did that with your mom and you do that with your boss. I mean, if you're going to do it to me, you're going to do it with everybody.
Okay, so you're saying that when I say, no, I'm staying like this, it's like a stubbornness, right? Like I'm staying like this is okay. Actually, I don't know. I don't see the similarities between those. Can you say more about that?
Both sides come from the state of dissatisfaction. They're both dissatisfaction. So let us say that you're here and that there is this. Okay. And we can say that, oh, well, I want this, but this is good enough. This is good enough. This is good enough. Or you can say, this is not good enough. I want that. But they're both coming out of dissatisfaction. The satisfaction would be, oh, yeah, I can see that.
And you keep, and that's like the 1%, 99% analogy you were giving earlier, right? So the little bit of success or satisfaction that's experienced from seeing it, and then the success that's experienced from acknowledging that success, the enthusiasm and that satisfaction just naturally grows the more and more you focus on it.
Right, which is another way of saying that if you come in with 1% and it's pointed out to you that, yes, that is nice, it's a 1%, and there is the 99%, then the other side of it would be, well, hell no, I don't care about the 99%. Look how great I am at 1%. But it's said in a state of anger, justification, as if the pointing out of the 99% was saying that you're bad because you only have 1%. And the answer to that would be congratulate yourself for the 1% and let that grow, as opposed to saying, no, you're bad because you pointed out the 99%. So the whole idea then is to come to a state of satisfaction in the moment, rather than in the moment justifying bad behavior in the past or justifying good behavior in the past. When we're actually talking about what's happening right now. So, and this happens a lot when students will come up and ask a question, and while I'm answering the question, they said, well, I've been doing that, as if they're trying to convince me that they used to do it, when in fact, in this present moment, they're not doing it.
Yeah.
And so that's how we cling to the past. We cling to the past. In fact, in the Roman times, they had an expression that is still used for that, and that is that we stand on past laurels. In other words, I won that game one time. That means that every time that I lose the game this time, it's okay that I lost the game this time because I once did win the game. Rather than look at what we're doing right now. So we use the past to justify a bad present. And that's very common.
I think it's just that, like, I've seen a lot of people on the Sangha, and just before I started working with you, Dhammarato, like, I heard about first jhana and stuff, and that, you know, the more and more you relax, and the more and more you relax into the satisfaction, the first jhana naturally arises.
Well, that's what you'll hear around here. A lot of places you won't hear anything like that.
Right. And I think, like, sometimes I have that in my head of, like, am I there yet? Like, is there more there? Like, well, because also I've experienced a greater degree of satisfaction in the past comparably to now.
Well, do you remember that satisfaction and how it feels? And we can go back and do it now. It always has to be done about right now. What's happening right now.
I haven't been able to just remember it and then do it. I mean, is that what are you suggesting that? Trying that?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's
really?
one, do it all the time. An example of that is giving the student a happy song. Kind of a happy song that if he's old enough, it'll be from when his childhood in the 1950s, because that's where I get all my happy music. I haven't heard any happy music since the Beatles.
So you're saying it helps to deliberately remember that past satisfaction and then bring that into the present?
Present moment, to remember that you can feel good, to remember that you can change the unwholesome thought in this moment to a wholesome thought by a trigger or an anchor. This is what ānāpānasati is really all about, is learning to use triggers or anchors. You've heard in psychology about pushing your buttons. Okay. Well, you've got some happy buttons in there. Go push them instead.
You know, my favorite analogy is the Peter Pan. I like to give people the Peter Pan advice. You know, like, think of one happy thought, you'll fly. There's real wisdom in that. You know, like, that's really essentially what we're talking about. Focus on your happy thought, you'll fly.
Well, that's the main teaching of the Buddha. That's what it is. What's missing in the Peter Pan edition of that is the idea, the magical idea given to children that all you have to do is have that one happy thought right now and you'll be able to fly from now on. That's how we kind of get it. In other words, we've got our diploma, we've got our degree, we've got our thing. And so now that we've had that, we can fly. We've got our pilot's license or whatever like that. And the reality is that we can only fly when we are having the happy thought. We cannot rely upon the happy thoughts of the past, but we can use those thoughts of the past of joy and happiness, remembering things that were really marvelous for you, and then bring not that memory up to the present moment, but how you felt in that moment. Bring that to right now. Everyone remembers how to feel good. You've had good feelings in your past. No one can make it to adulthood with just one unhappy or miserable moment by moment by moment, day after day. No, we have a mixture. We do have recess.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay. And so let us remember that did have recess, and that we do have recess. Let's have recess right now.
I kind of get it, right? Like the memory is essentially based in the mind. And if it's like, so there's kind of like a process, right? If we're remembering the memory, we're going into the past of the mind, and we're basically going to get neurotic, right? Because we're hanging out in the mind. It's drumming up a lot of concepts. It's a lot of ideas and thoughts, and it creates a kind of pathway. It's like it takes time to go from the memory to the thinking to the past to now. And I think what you're saying, and the real wisdom and the power of the Buddha's teaching, is that essentially he's like, just go straight to the source. Just recall a feeling, and that's really rare because I have never really thought or trained to use my memory in such a way to remember the feeling, because it's always about like we're just not really trained to do that. But really, if we're just remembering the feeling, it's just a direct experience of the past feeling. And then if we concentrate on the present moment experience, we're going to continue to perpetuate that feeling just by concentrating on it and having a extreme concentration on the present moment. And so like it's basically there's no loop, and it's I don't know, I see the symmetry and the beauty of it, like the genius of the technique, because you're shortcutting the memory and you're shortcutting the concepts. You're literally just using memory to get the ball rolling, and then you're using concentration on the present moment, and that perpetuates it. And it doesn't get you into the conceptual mind. You're just feeling good. I just kind of like, that's really amazing. So I just want to kind of articulate that for you guys, because that's what I was thinking and seeing. But yeah, it's definitely genius technique.
Uh-huh. You just mentioned, Corey, the concept of concentrating on the present moment. I remember many, many years ago seeing a photo of a cat that was hanging on and clinging to a limb. And the caption was, "To hang on." Okay, you've heard that, to hang on, which is basically what you mean by concentrating on the moment. But a better way for that cat would have been to not hang on, but rather get up on top of the limb and balance. That's a really important concept, that we feel like that we're just kind of hanging on, like hanging on to the present moment or concentrating, holding on to it, where in fact the real way of doing it is getting on top of it and then perching ourselves, balancing ourselves on top of it, and that takes almost no effort now. So I would recommend to not concentrate on the present moment, but to relax into the present moment in a balanced way. Just relax. You don't have to concentrate. that in fact that word concentration seems to have become part and parcel of the Buddhist vocabulary. But almost always the word concentration has negative connotations to it. An example of that is that concentration actually means to take things out and put something, or so that you have only the essence left. That I'm not going to pay any attention to that stuff out there. I'm going to go just concentrate on this. But another way of looking at it is that in this present moment, there is one heck of a lot of stuff happening. In this present moment, there is a whole lot more of, I mean, when we say a whole lot, we're talking about 10 to the, gosh, how many powers do you have? Probably 10 to the 80th is how many things are happening right now around you. I mean, it's just unbelievable how much stuff is going on. And if we concentrate on just one of them, we're going to miss all the other stuff. What we don't need to do is to concentrate. What we need to do is to open the mind and open our senses to what's really happening, because a whole lot of stuff is happening. How good are we at paying attention to really what's going on here, rather than trying to throw out all of that stuff that is going on, so that we can concentrate on this. And so one of the easy examples that I use is concentrated frozen orange juice. That was very, very common in the 1970s. Okay. But the funny part about frozen concentrated orange juice is nobody drinks frozen concentrated orange juice. It's not concentrated for drinking, it's concentrated for transportation purposes. That when you get to that frozen concentrated orange juice, before you drink it, you make it not concentrated anymore. You make it samadhi. You put back one of the ingredients that was missing from it. And so real orange juice that used to be frozen concentrated orange juice is now orange juice, because it's now a juice, not a concentrate. So this is one of the problems with the word concentration. The word samadhi, that was the original Pali, has the quality of a gable. It has the quality of tent poles. It has the quality of putting things together like a tripod, or let us say an American Indian teepee that has poles, and those poles are all tied at the top, because if the poles weren't tied together at the top, then you could make that teepee and it'd just fall over. Every pole will just go whichever way, right? But if you take those poles and tie them at the top, then that means that when you plant each of those poles into the ground in the area around that you're going to make the teepee, they will have stability. And this is what we're looking for. But when the mind is samadhi, that means that all the factors that are needed are collected together, that we are not a crowd inside. Now, Eric Berne and Sigmund Freud did point out that we're often a crowd inside, that we have an argument with ourselves. That one of the ways that we're a crowd inside is that when we lie, that means that we've got both the truth and the lie. That makes us duality. That puts us in one state. Another one would be when the mind is in a state of doubt. Well, that means that it might be this, it might be that, it might be all over the place, but it's not collected together. So when a mind is unified and collected in samadhi, that means that it's free from doubt, because it's whole and unified and not missing any key ingredients.
Question. What does samadhi feel like? How do we know that we're in samadhi?
Well, there is a list of things that we can use as a guide for that. But the actual answer to it is that when the mind is in samadhi, wow, do you know it? But there are key ingredients for the mind going into samadhi. This is why we talk about it in the sense of samadhi in reference also into the practice of ānāpānasati and the way that we practice ānāpānasati is building the skills that are needed. And when we have those skills that are needed put together as a group so that they are aspects of something, then it becomes a whole. All right. An example of that is an automobile. If you've got the automobile parts spread all over the yard, that car is not going to go anywhere. You got the pistons in the garage, and you've got the crankcase in the closet, and you've got the mufflers on the roof. So that car is not going to go anywhere. You got to put all of those parts together. You got to make the car samadhi, and then you have something new. And what is new? Transportation, the correct functioning of the car. So the correct functioning of the mind then would be what we're looking for when the mind is in samadhi. But when the mind is not in samadhi, it's not going to function correctly. So when Bhikkhu Buddhadasa talks about getting the mind fit for work, what he means is that, yeah, we've got all the parts of the mind that are needed to do the job. We do have the seats, and we do have the steering wheel, and we do have the engine, and we do have tires pumped up and on the wheels, and everything is put together. Or we can use another example of a clock, that if you have a clock that is correctly functioning with all of the gears put into place the way that they were designed, with enough lubrication and the parts are clean, then the clock will tick. But if you want to concentrate that clock and take a sledgehammer to it, you can make it small, but it's not going to function very well when it's concentrated. And so this is what happens with meditation. If people get their mind into a state of concentration and then they leave and go out into their normal life and they say, well, why didn't the concentration that I got in meditation help me in my life? The answer is because you are not developing the skills that you need to live, and the place to develop those skills is when we're practicing ānāpānasati and develop those skills. Okay, so now that we've got that underway, we can talk about, well, what are now the constituent components? And the answer to that is that there are either 5 or 6, depending upon which sutta that you read. Now, that doesn't mean that one is wrong and the other one is right. It just means the approach that's being taken. Okay, but the number one item on the list is that the mind has to be free from unwholesome thoughts. It has to be free from that 99%.
In a moment or for several moments?
Well, whatever moment is for you, this moment, right now. Okay. Now, if you want to give that wall clock time, a moment can be a split second down to 1/10 of a second. It can be 5 or 6 seconds. For some people, a moment can last for an hour. When you are confused and trying to work something out, you can be in that mind moment of confusion for 10, 15, or 20 minutes until the old noggin gets so tired that you go off into tiredness, and now you're not in confusion anymore. So a mind moment can last for a long time. It depends upon if we're still doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, one mind moment after the next. So that the word moment then does not have necessarily a time on it. That in fact, the old joke is, what happens once in a minute, twice in a moment, but not once in 1,000 years? Do you know the answer to that riddle? Once in a minute, twice in a moment, but not even once in 1,000 years. The letter M.
Oh man, I was close to it. I was like a second away from being like, it's got to be phonetic or words or letters. Man.
Okay. So
What are the
now,
other constituents?
yeah, well, we've got that. Let's go for in this moment, free from the hindrances. That moment can last for a tenth of a second, a full second, 5 minutes. Let us plan on that happening for 5 minutes if you want to have a goal. But it's just one happy moment after another because the mind is wholesome. So we're staying in at least this moment in that 1%, making the mind wholesome, taking unwholesome thoughts, taking wants, desires, and all of that out, and coming to a wholesome thought. So the next thing that we look at is that what is a wholesome thought? And that wholesome thought then would be the kind of thought that will help us gather the rest of the items that we need in this group of 5 or 6. And so this is the state of ānāpānasati that is normally referred to as step 10, which means to gladden the mind. Now, please be careful that these steps are not marching orders, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's much more like a dance, where sometimes you're just flying through the air and there's no steps to be taken, but you just made it 30 feet if you're a ballerina. And if you develop the skill of being a ballerina, then you can fly through the air with the greatest of ease. The question is, do you have the skills to land? So, as we're developing the gladdening of the mind, which means also brightening the mind, we're literally talking ourselves into feeling good because we have been using our verbal mental thoughts, our discursive thoughts about what if this could go wrong and what if that could go wrong. We literally train ourselves into feeling bad by the unwholesome thoughts that we have. If we start having wholesome thoughts, if we remember to have a wholesome thought, even if I just had a wholesome thought and then an unwholesome thought comes back, the question is, it's not, oh, why did that unwholesome thought come back? Because that's just another unwholesome thought. The right thought to have is, aha, I caught you. And now I'm back into wholesome thoughts again. So wholesome thoughts then are the most important quality as opposed to unwholesome thoughts, which is hindrances. So the freedom from the hindrances means that we're already having wholesome thoughts. The kind of thoughts that we then have will be the kinds of thoughts to make us feel the way that we want to feel, which is the Pali word is sukha. And sukha is exactly opposite of dukkha. That if we are having unwholesome thoughts, we're going to have dukkha. If we're having wholesome thoughts, then we're going to be, at least in that moment, free from dukkha, free from dissatisfaction, because we just talked ourselves into being satisfied. So let's look at the constituent components now of sukha. It has the quality of, first off, and most important, safety and security, because almost always our unwholesome thoughts are thoughts about what could go wrong, what could happen that's dangerous. We literally spend a lot of time talking ourselves into being afraid, and fear is a primary motivator. Republicans would never go to the polls and vote for anything, especially not a Republican, if they weren't terrified. And so we have to make Republicans terrified. What can we make them terrified about? Well, we can name things. We can name blacks. We can name gays. We can name atheists. We can name Putin. Anything that it takes to get people terrified will get them to act. The question is what will you do when you're not terrified? More than likely, you're not going to be doing so much action. So we have to get ourselves out of that sense of terrified and into a sense of safe. So I use a little joke, something like, well, look around, folks. There's no alligators on the floor. There's no crocodiles here. Yeah, Parker, you check. Make sure. Are there any crocodiles on your floor?
No.
And when we recognize that actually, kind of think about it, things are right now safe. Now, the cops may be coming in 10 minutes, but right now they're not here. We're safe. And we need to get ourselves into that feeling of feeling safe, feeling secure. Because if we're not safe and not secure, then we're afraid. And afraid is basically a hindrance to feeling good. So your feelings as well as your thoughts can be hindrances. How you feel, if you feel bad, is a hindrance to how you feel feeling good. And so we actually talk ourselves into there's nothing to worry about. There's no place to go. There is no problems. There are no bears in the closet. There is no boogeyman that's going to get this naughty little boy here. There is no big God in the sky that is shooting his darts or throwing his trident or anything like that, that we're just okay right now. We're safe. And if we can talk ourselves into feeling safe and secure, then we can work on comfortable. Are you comfortable? And if we can get ourselves in the state of safety, security, and comfortable, the next little item on the list is satisfaction. When we feel safe and secure, now we can feel, and also comfortable, now we can feel satisfied. And this is the goal. The immediate goal is to get ourselves in a state of satisfaction. Now, when we practice that over and over and over again, we begin to get the idea that, hey, I can feel safe and I can feel satisfied, that this was not a one-time shot deal. You know, our first moment of ānāpānasati is sort of like beginner's luck, like you have on a pool table. The kid comes in, he doesn't play pool, but he makes his first shot, he jumps up and down for joy, and then he misses every shot for the next 5 years. Okay, and this is actually what happens with most meditators. But go back to that beginner's luck, recognizing that you are a beginner. Again, this moment is a brand new moment. You're a beginner. Right now, let's have some beginner's luck. Begin again. Never mind. Start again. When we do that and recognize that we can start again, and we can start again, and we can start again, that builds confidence. And so now something new is coming. And that new thing that's coming is the state of, I can do this. The feeling of success. So now we have safety, security, comfort, satisfaction, and success. And eventually on top of that will come the last item, and that last item then would be called, sorry, in our language, we don't have a really good language word for it, so I'll use one, but make sure that you understand how I'm defining the word, and that is the feeling of wealth, a feeling of overflowing with success, overflowing with satisfaction, rather than wealth in the sense of money. That you begin to feel that you're rich with joy. So this is the quality that we're building up. And the Pali words now that we're using, besides the panchanarava, the hindrances out of the mind, we're now developing sukha and piti. In order to develop this sukha and piti, we have to apply the mind to the wholesome. And then as we practice applying and beginning to get that skill, because as soon as we apply the mind to the wholesome, it's going to go back to the unwholesome. Alex, you're very familiar with the fact that it's going to go back to the unwholesome.
Yes.
And so we need to come back again to the wholesome. Remember to keep coming back to the wholesome. Remember, that's the sati. That's the important thing, is to remember that you did take a deep breath and relax. You could deepen another deep breath right now and relax right now. Over and over and over again, we practice this, applying the mind to the wholesome, applying the mind to sukha, applying the mind to safety, applying the mind to security, applying the mind to comfort, applying the mind to satisfaction, applying the mind to success. And when we keep applying the mind that way, we begin then, the next step would be to sustain the mind. If we apply it now and then apply it right 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 now, that's a way of sustaining it. And so that's the next skill to be developed. Now, along with this, when we feel comfortable and really begin to feel comfortable and really begin to feel satisfied, guess what? The body begins to relax. And that's number 6. So we have freedom from hindrances, sukha, or the feeling of good, the feeling of satisfied. Then we have the piti, which is the feeling of success. We've got this. I can do it. And then we have the applied and sustained thoughts. And then we have the feeling of relaxation in the body. Oh, it's just so relaxed. So these are the 5 or 6 items that we bring together in samadhi. And when we have those 5 or 6 factors together in samadhi, this is referred to in Buddhism as the samadhi of the first jhana. And it is a normal state. You have been in that state many times. When you were a little kid, tearing that Tucker toy apart or taking that doll apart, you were really in a state of satisfaction and joy. Children are in the state of first jhana on a regular basis up until about the age of 4 or 5.
Sure.
So we need to get ourselves back into that state that we had when we were little kids. Okay, Robert, you've got a question.
Are the jhanas more about satisfaction, or the what we were calling concentration, but we might call unification? That might be a better word. That was a question I was going to ask. But are they more about the happiness or the unification?
Yes, that in fact that's a word that is even, I would say, correctly translated out of the Pali. Right unification of mind is a good definition of Aryan samadhi. Right, noble unification of mind. This is what we're looking for. And what is the mind when it's unified like this? It's got these constituent components. It's free from unwholesome thought. It has satisfaction, not dissatisfaction. It has sukha, which and then it has the piti, which is the feeling of success. Now, it is wrongly translated into the word rapture. And we do know what the word rapture is all about. That's when God comes and grabs you. You get flung right up into the air. Okay, so I imagine that, well, maybe you could call piti rapture when you describe it like that, when you're just flung right up into the air. But most people, when they get flung right up in the air, they think they're going someplace. Guess what? You are. You're going to land again. The question is, do you have the skills to land? Because you will. Alex, you will land. You will keep crash landing. You will keep crash landing until you learned how to land. And what does that mean? That means is that when you do have an unwholesome thought, you can say, oh, well, that's just another takeoff runway. It's not a crash land.
Would you say that? Would you say that learning how to land is synonymous with seeing that when you come down from that experience of joy, or when you come down from that experience of relaxation and the mind gets more obstructed, that knowing how to land is really just, oh, that's okay. I don't care about that.
Exactly right.
I don't care about
land
getting there
as if you're still flying.
Yeah.
Land as if you're still flying, because then you'll just take right back off and start flying again. But if you crash and the feeling of the crash, that means that, oh no, poor me, I have crash land. Okay, and now look at all the unwholesome thought. I mean, you got to go clean the runway. You got to throw out the garbage. You got to build a new airplane. You got to repair the airport. I mean, look at all kinds of thoughts that we have just because we had a negative thought. But if you can learn how to land, then you just take right back off.
And it seems like the only reason why that crash landing happens is because I care so much.
Right, because you didn't look where you're going. You cared instead.
I cared instead, exactly.
Instead of enjoyed.
Not caring is synonymous with not going. not caring is synonymous with seeing that it takes a whole bunch of work to crash the plane, to rebuild the plane, to rebuild the runway and all this stuff. So not caring is just the easier route. That's like,
Right.
oh,
Just don't care about it. Yeah, it's not
that's fine.
important. Yeah, everything is good.
Be like
So
equanimity.
we don't.
What was that, Corey?
Yeah, what was it?
It would be like equanimity, like not caring. Apathy would be a negative, and equanimity would be like positive, not caring.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a subtle difference. But yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
what a beautiful way of saying it. I hadn't even thought about it like that.
Yeah,
that's
me neither.
quite
That's good.
excellent. Right, is right. I happily don't give a flying flip.
There you go. Skillful, not caring.
Yeah, skillful, not caring. That's what it is. Robert, you got your hand up.
Yeah. So my first question was about
I'm gonna go, guys. Good night.
the.
Okay,
Good night, Alex.
Thank you. Bye.
Are the jhanas more about this the happiness, having a like a positive mindset, a high valence mind state, to use the neuroscience terminology, but is it more about the happiness, or is it about the unification?
I can't see the difference. That's like saying, is this coin a quarter because I can see the tail, or is this coin a quarter because I can see the head? That's the kind of question that you're asking. That unification of mind actually means that you're satisfied or joyful about the state of mind you're in. How could you have a unification of mind and still be dissatisfied? That makes no sense. The question is, what is the definition of happiness? That in fact, years ago, I used to talk about joy, 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 joy all the time and use that as the definition of sukha. And that a lot of guys would say, or even some gals would also say that, yeah, I do feel joy, but it's not enough joy. I want more joy. Well, that means that their joy is unsatisfied. What kind of joy is that?
Pleasure.
Wanting more of it is not being satisfied. So the satisfaction and the joy are interrelated in that way. They're the same thing. You cannot have a mind that's unified when you've got a mind that's dissatisfied, because the mind that's dissatisfied is out looking for the satisfaction. Where in fact, we don't need to get anything to be satisfied. That's the beauty of the teaching of the Buddha, is to recognize you don't need anything to be satisfied. Just be satisfied. Just remember, that's all you really need, is these little pieces of the Eightfold Noble Method, which I have been harping on without listing in order, and that is, going back to the formality, is to remember. That's the sati, to wakey, look at what you're doing, is the second one, and that is to remember to look. That is one's right looking, a right view. A lot of people think that the teaching of the Buddha is about right noble view means a viewpoint, or an attitude in a way of a worldview or a perspective. And that's true about ordinary right view, and it's true about wrong view. These are world views. But the teaching of the Buddha, right noble view, is not a view, it's a viewing. To look, to note, to see. And with that, we then take the right effort to note that this is an unwholesome thought, and to throw that out, and to come in and have a wholesome thought, and to see that wholesome thought as wholesome, and congratulate yourself for having a wholesome thought. And that's another wholesome thought, is congratulations. And so that 1% is I'm satisfied. The second point is congratulations. You now have 2% because you're congratulating yourself for 1%. And so this is how we get it to build. Go ahead, Robert.
How do you assess the feeling tone of a wholesome thought? For example, I can sometimes have thoughts that feel very wholesome at the time, but in retrospect, I see that they cause tremendous suffering.
Well, that's the
Is there-
learning process. That's why I call them skills. What used to look satisfying was merely just gratification. In other words, we got some value out of it. That's why I yelled at my mom, is because that made me feel tough and powerful and strong. And I was satisfied with arguing with her and telling her what a slut she was. But then I go away later and I recognize, wait a minute, that was a pretty dangerous thing to tell my mom what a slut she is. What does that tell her about me? Who am I? And so when we do it like that, we begin to wake up to recognize, yeah, I did get gratification from that, but now I can see that it was unwholesome. And that's the learning process. And so now we recognize I can find better gratification that's not so dangerous. When I'm dealing with my mom and she's fussing at me, I could, I can get along with her a whole lot better by maybe agreeing with her rather than taking the power that I feel by being angry. So we get gratification by being angry. We get gratification by doing the wrong thing, almost in the sense of rebellion. But one of the problems with rebellion is that it's dangerous. Even though it feels greatly gratifying, it can also be dangerous. And so this is the real looking that we have to do, is not just to see the gratification that we would normally just see, but also the danger. Because if we can see the danger in these unwholesome thoughts, then we can plot our escape.
Yeah, I got a good example.
Yes,
if you want to, yeah, a good example of this is like, I like to try and help people with wisdom and teachings, and I like to try and reach out and help people. And I was reaching out to try and help someone recently, and they mistook what I said, and they kind of distorted it, and they got very defensive and angry and combative. They wanted to say a lot of negative things to me, and I wanted to defend myself because I didn't want to make them mad. But because of the state that they were in, they took it the wrong way and they kind of created suffering, and then they lashed out at me. And so my desire to essentially be right, that's what it really felt like, is I felt like you didn't understand me. I was trying to help you out, and you kind of took it the wrong way, and then you suffered, and then you made me suffer by lashing out at me.
No, so he did not make you suffer. You chose to do that all on your own.
Yeah, it's like an unconscious, it automatically happened because I'm so used to just doing it.
Right. It was unconscious. That's what we mean by ignorance, is unconscious.
Yeah, and so I took the time to step back because I replied once and I saw the cycle happening. And then I was like, I looked forward and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to change this person's mind. They're just going to stay where they want to stay. It's their choice to stay in this cycle. And just so I decided that, yeah, I don't need to be gratified. Like it's just going to result in them lashing out at me yet again. They're going to suffer and I'm going to suffer. So I'm going to look past this need to be gratified, to be right. And I'm just going to drop it. I'm just going to go. I'm just going to move on. I'm just going to be happy and do my own.
That's right. I can be happy and satisfied that they don't like me and they don't like what I said. And that's okay. But because we don't like it, we think that, oh, well, I can get rid of my not liking what he thinks about me by convincing him otherwise. Guess what? He's not going to get convinced.
Yeah.
Whatever I have been doing has gotten him unconvinced. And if I keep doing that, he's going to get even more unconvinced. Then in fact, the way that, and so the right way to handle that is with joy. You don't have to convince him of anything. All you have to do is find your joy in this moment. And if you can find that joy in this moment, then you can share your joy with him, whether he's convinced or not.
Yeah.
That in fact, that's what the reason that you wanted to convince him is so that you could get the gratification of your being right, thinking that now I will be happy because I was right. Guess what?
Well, I just wanted to share my happiness with them.
Right. In fact,
they weren't having it.
Well, that's because you weren't sharing your happiness with him. You were sharing your information, which he called as judgmental information. So what we need to do instead of sharing information with people is sharing joy, because that's what you really wanted to share in the first place.
Yeah.
And so just laugh and tease and poke and play and have fun and all of that kind of stuff without teaching him anything. Get him into a good mood, and then you're successful. Because that's the only practice of ānāpānasati is anyway, is get your own self into a good mood right now. And getting that as a habit so that you can get yourself into a good mood anytime that you want to be in a good mood, and you want to be in a good mood probably most of the time. And so we need to
Essentially, that was
practice.
this person was like dealing with depression, and so they had a kind of automatic I can't be happy mentality. And so no matter how happy or joyful I was or how much wisdom I shared, they just refused to, because they had this belief that I'm depressed and I can't be undepressed. So you trying to do anything other than recognize how depressed I am is just you being judgmental and wrong. And so I had to learn the hard way that some people just won't allow you to make them happy. You just have to let them be and do what you got to do. And
not only that, there is jujitsu. And let me tell you about a little bit of gentle music, jujitsu. So there someone is trying to prove to you how bad they feel. And you use the words that they use. So if they use the word depression, you can say, wow, you're right. I have never seen anybody as depressed as you are right now. Let's have a contest. Let's see if I can get even more depressed than you are. Okay, so you begin to tease them about the depression itself. And pretty soon, just like Parker, they'll come up with a great big smile. Because they begin to say, hey, I may have been depressed, so depressed that you couldn't get me out of it. But when you show me how depressed I am and what a joke it is, now we can begin to laugh.
Yeah, that's jiu-jitsu for you.
Right. So just maintain your joy. The thing of it is that it wasn't that he refused to become undepressed. It was that he was just doing what he was doing, and you used his depression to lose your joy. Make sure when you're talking to people that they can't talk you out of your joy. You keep talking to yourself, well, I can handle this guy. I mean, I don't care how depressed you are.
Yeah, Corey, I'd add to that. It's a lot harder to make the world a less depressing place if you're depressed. When you're not depressed, it's kind of like your automatic response to things. So it takes a lot of the weight off your shoulders.
Or we could make it even more ridiculous. Wow, you're so depressed. You know, while you're talking to me, I'm getting depressed too. The two of us are so depressed now. Why don't we go jump off a ledge together? And then the guy will say, well, I'm not that depressed. Oh, you're not that depressed. Okay, well, now we got someplace to go. If you're not depressed enough to kill yourself right now, you're not that depressed.
I guess I would just be so afraid of them having a different response that I would be afraid to be so risky, because like I just kind of, it's my compassion that made me reach out to this person anyways. And so but it was also, like you're saying, my desire for them to be other than they are. I wanted them to be not depressed. And so that desire, which I have no control over, essentially was making me suffer, because I was like, this person is in such a bad place. I remember being in that place. I'm good now. I want to help them be good. And that essentially, that desire for something to be other than the way it was. We talked about this before, and that is a source of suffering, to desire something to be different than the way that it is now.
Well, if you notice, Corey, what I said in that is that I was using the language of joining, or the language of what we call pacing. In other words, if they are that depressed, then you go get intentionally, consciously that depressed with them. Go ahead, go get depressed with them. Make it a contest. See if you can get even more depressed than they are. And let them, very slowly they'll figure out that, hey, you're teasing them right now, and this is kind of a joke. How depressed can you make me? Oh, wow, I can get really depressed. Do you have a gun?
Yeah.
Can I borrow your gun? You got a knife? I'm going to do it right now. I mean, if you don't kill yourself, I'm going to kill myself. Let's do it together. And begin to see how ridiculous it is. But you have to keep your joy with that. And it may, even though I've done it in like 5 to 10 seconds, it may take you 30 minutes of being depressed with them.
Mm-hmm.
That you out depress them. If they've got their hands in their face like this, sitting with their knees on their or their elbows on their knees, that kind of position that they've got. You can get even lower than that. You can lay down on the floor with your hands in your face. Take on their posture, but exaggerate it. That's an easy way to deal with it, is to show them just how depressed they are by mirroring them, but you do it consciously. This is called pacing. And once you get successful at the pacing them, when they recognize how depressed you are, then you can begin to make a change and they'll start to follow you. It's like once you have that trailer hitched to your car, now you can pull it. But you got to get it hitched to your car first. You can't just drive by that trailer expecting the trailer to just come following along with you. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You got to hook with them. And the way to hook with them is by getting into the same state that they're in. But you don't do it, let us say, ignorantly, because that's actually possible. And in fact, in a way, that's exactly what did happen. That because they were so depressed and you couldn't get them out of depressed, you decided to get depressed too. So they won that one. But if you do it consciously, then you can go ahead and get depressed, but you're doing it as a scam, but you're doing it to connect with them. And once you've got that connection, now you can drive away slowly and they'll just follow along.
Yeah. This kind of leads into the question that I had earlier, which is a kind of problem that I've noticed with a lot of people. And I'm calling it the prison of rationality. Essentially, it's this kind of way that the mind operates, that the mind functions on rationality. And so people begin to have these huge concepts and these frameworks of like, oh, being happy is being wealthy, and I'm poor. So that means that poor means sad, and I'm sad because I'm not. So they build these frameworks that they believe are rational. But really what they're doing is they are imprisoning themselves in a kind of prison of rationality. And this prison of rationality is almost like a function of the mind. It seems to thrive and work.
But it has something missing. And that missing part is correct information. Yes, we are rational, but we're often rational using irrational data to try to figure it out and make it into rational without using good data. Here's an example of that, the one about poor. Guess what? Most of the people who are the most happiest on the planet Earth are actually quite poor. Ajahn Bhikkhu Buddhadasa probably never had more than, 2 coins to rub together since he was a child. And yet he was happy. The other side of it is that if I tell you, Corey or Dhammadas, you cannot have $100 million. And you said, well, yeah, I kind of know that. If you tell Donald Trump he cannot have $100 million, he's going to get really unhappy. And so that means the point of the scale or your own expectations. That poor people are actually more likely to be happy because they at least are reconciled to the fact that they don't have enough money to call themselves rich, and they never will, but they could still be happy. To where the people who are greedy and have money and want more money and more money, there's no end to the greed. There's no end to how much money that they can have. Then, in fact, it becomes a contest. Look at Bezos and Zuckerberg and Bill Gates and I forgot the guy his name at Google, and Elon Musk. Those dudes are now competing with each other, making each other miserable over who's got the most money. And I don't have nearly as amount of money as any of those guys, and I'm happier than all of them put together. So that means then that the piece of information that we have is I will not be happy until I have money. That's false information. And that's how we use our rationale. We use our rationale based upon wrong information, and we wind up making ourselves miserable. But if we actually see what's real, then our rationality can be useful. And the reality is that you can be happy right now without that money.
The thing that I was also going to want to ask you about is when it comes to the prison of rationality, if we are going to be essentially manipulating our own mind and choosing our mindset, and we're choosing wholesome thoughts, and our thoughts are bound with this kind of prison of rationality. So there's two ways to get around that come up to me really quickly. One of them is to use wisdom, right? Use the practices that we've been talking about.
Right.
The other
Which
one
would be
is
then
kind
improve the data. Exactly, to improve the data.
Right.
Let's
the other
not
one,
use the childhood data that we collected years ago. Let's use the data that we have available to us now.
Yeah,
Do
practice
good
and develop a new database.
Okay, what's the other possibility?
The other possibility was use the mind like a puppet, be a manipulator. Essentially, change things as you want them to be changed. Don't be bound by rationality. Essentially, try to transcend rationality, and that's a kind of a very difficult thing to do, but I've found ways to do it. But I've also not used it because it seems to be that the mind seems to function best when it has this principle of rationality to kind of bind everything together. So when we were talking earlier about ānāpānasati and choosing wholesome thoughts, my first thought was to manipulate the mind and to essentially kind of rework everything using a kind of just using them, choosing to think what I think and rearranging the concepts as I see fit, and to just kind of manipulate everything, to essentially play my mind like a fiddle. And then the other one is
I highly recommend that you do that. But there's a slight difference in there. And that is that we are going to do that fiddle playing or that violin. First off, we're going to do is we're going to tune that violin correctly. But ultimately, when I say the tuning the violin, that means that we're starting to put in good data rather than, okay, I'm going to play this violin. I don't care if it's out of tune. I don't even know if it's in or out of tune. And so that's the ignorant way of doing it. But if you practice correctly, the whole idea of right viewing or right looking or right noting is to see things as they really are. In that sense, right now, you guys are safe. Not one of you've got an alligator on your floor.
I
That's
get it.
the
So it
reality
just
of it.
feels
There
like
is nothing to be afraid of. Why do I feel a fear right now? Obviously, the only reason I would have fear right now is because I'm thinking about something that's fearful that's not here right now. And so let us use reality. Let's use good data. Let's use accurate data and use that rationality. And
I
so
think
in that regard, you can say that the way that we're talking ourselves into feeling good is by telling ourselves real good things, as opposed to talking ourselves into feeling bad by telling ourselves things that are bad news that are not real right now.
Okay, I get what you're saying. Like it, and I think what I was getting to is that it feels like it is manipulation when we are doing these things that are essentially kind of breaking our previous prison of rationality that was built on ignorance. And so maybe it feels
Yeah,
like
okay,
manipulation.
all right. Right. It is manipulation because you're adding good data. Wow, what a manipulation.
Manipulating our ignorance
Corey.
into wisdom.
Corey,
Yeah.
I wouldn't use the analogy of tuning the violin, because it sort of implies that you're going to twist some knobs at the top and then it will be in tune. It'll be in tune for several days or weeks, or depends how often you play a violin. Maybe just a day.
It works.
Yeah, but
tune this violin.
yes, if you're tuning all day, you won't play many notes. But it doesn't tend to work like that in my experience. Like I could do a very good meditation, for example. We could think of that as the tuning the violin, just the tuning of it. Let's say I'm doing some jhanas meditation or something, right? But after I get up, the hindrances come back. So I think your analogy is good, and it's better even just that you're playing the happy notes on the violin. So instead of playing in minor chords, you play it in major chords.
Well, that may be true, but at least we're following a set of rules that have been developed over the centuries about what good music sounds like to your ear, as opposed to, and I have been in other cultures, and in fact, one of the things that happened when I was in a monk traveling with another group of monks in Cambodia is having to be, let us say, assaulted by ancient tribal Cambodian music. I would call it tinky tinky music, but I mean, they would make music by banging on all kinds of things, and it didn't matter whether it was in tune or not, according to Western ears.
Yeah.
For them, it was music.
Yeah.
For me, I know Beethoven and Bach, and I know the scales, and I know all of this, and they weren't doing any of that kind of stuff. How could they possibly call this music?
Beautiful chaos.
Well, I cared because they weren't following my rules. When I recognize they're following their own rules and are doing it quite well, then that's their reality. The problem is, really, Corey, is that we think things are real because that's what we're used to. But in fact, there is a lot of stuff that is real that we're not used to. But what we would rather do is use the things that are old and familiar that are not real, and keep winding up in suffering and dukkha, when in fact, if we would look and investigate and find out what's actually real, and then use our rationale about what's really real, and come out of the habit of using bad information and winding up in suffering, we can use good information and wind up in joy. Anytime that you can remember to do that, let's look at what's real. What's real is the cops are not coming. What's real is that it is not snowing right now. It's not cold. All right. So that's the reality of it. And that's what a lot of in our society, mental health is all about. That people are less mentally healthy because they're using bad data. It's not the mind that's bad, it's the data that's bad.
Yeah.
And we're irrational. No, we're completely rational. We're just used completely rational thought process using bad data. In computers, we call that GIGO, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
So this is why we have to remember to look at the kinds of thoughts that we're having. Are these things wholesome, which means are they unreal? Or are we going to start having real thoughts? And the real thought says that everything is okay. Everything is fine. Everything is joyful. Everything is beautiful right here, right now. I don't have to worry about way over there. Let those people over there worry about what's over there. Here, I don't have any worries.
Really? Yeah, this is definitely where it becomes a skill. You got to practice and train into it. You got to put the good information in, get
Right.
used to how it feels,
Yep.
and
Keep
recognize
putting
it.
in good information. That's the skill of right view, is to remember to use real correct information rather than what we're used to using, stuff out of the past. So we actually could go so far then as to say, let's use the new real data of this moment rather than the old data from the past, because the old data from the past is more likely to be incorrect because times changed. And so
Yeah.
let's new data, new data. Like political polls. We always want the latest political poll. I don't care what a poll the outcome of a poll that happened before the last election. I want to know what's happening now. And yet people will go around saying, well, Donald Trump won that election. He won this election. Well, yeah, but that was in the past. What's he doing now? So, boy, this is really a good point. Remember that you've got new data. Let's go look at the new data. Robert, you still got your hand up.
Yes. So my question is, let's say we have some negative emotions come up, but they really feel like something that we have to face to let go of. They don't feel like something that it would be skillful to avoid by just gladdening the mind. They feel like there's something we need to engage with and feel deeply
So the
into
question
and listen to what they're trying to tell us.
all right, let's do it this way, just as a quick answer to that. Look at it in the sense of a corral where you have 4 quadrants, right? You've got a vertical bar and you've got a horizontal bar. On the vertical bar, we have, are you going to do it or not? Whatever it is. You just had a flat tire and you've called the car to a stop. You have to make a choice. Am I going to get out of the car and change the tire? I'm going to sit here in the car and not change the tire. Or anything else. Am I going to eat this next bite? Something else like that is that, oh, there's this old piece of food in the refrigerator. Shall I eat it or shall I throw it out? The answer is it's going to turn to shit regardless of whether you eat it or not. It's going to turn to shit whether you eat it or not. That's the reality of it. With that, then you can recognize that, well, maybe I should eat it. Maybe I should go ahead and throw it out. For a fat guy, he's going to eat it because he knows that he's supposed to eat things. He's been training himself his whole life. They call it the seafood diet. I eat anything I see. But that's not with wisdom. The wisdom is that that's an old piece of food. It probably is not going to be nearly as delicious. I mean, you know what yesterday's French fries taste like, so why would you eat yesterday's French fries? Well, because they remind me of French fries, and I know what French fries are. Therefore, if I eat these old French fries from yesterday, I'll pretend that they are today's French fries. Or in fact, no, they're just old. Right. So this is another way of looking at data is like food. It gets old and it gets old quickly. And so let's stay fresh. Let's stay in the moment. Let's stay with real data that's happening now. And the real data that's happening right now is that everything is okay. Everything is fine. That's the way
Thank
of
you.
let's get some new data. Well, guys, this has been actually quite a nice call. This is it. I like it. Good data here. So,
Thank you,
Todd,
Dhammarato.
yes, Todd, good to see you. Good to meet you. I hope to see you again soon. And
Nice to meet you, Todd.
thank you. Yeah,
Thank
Nice
you.
to
It
meet
was
you,
nice
you
to
guys.
meet. It was nice to meet all of you, and I look forward to the next one. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Looking forward to it.
what I'm looking forward to is for you guys to become friends with each other, to share the Dhamma. I really appreciate Robert that he goes on to Skype, and I also appreciate Dhammadas, he's, by the way, he's the king of Discord. Congratulations, Dhammadas. Thank you so much for all of the nice work that you're doing to keep the thing going for us. And so you probably met a lot of friends that way. Yeah. So that's what we're all about, is that if you can learn to make friends with yourself on the inside, that's Dhamma. If you can then learn to make friends with people on the outside, then that's Sangha. And that's what we're promoting here, is mutual friendship and joy. By the way, the same thing that Jesus was trying to promote that the Christians have missed out on. Jesus was all about cheer and camaraderie and the golden rule and taking care of one another and charity and generosity. And Christianity is all about, oh no, we better go get this law passed or things are going to go really south. Well, guess what? The South is going really south. So thank you all for so much. And I promote friendship on the inside, friendship on the outside. And so I hope that you guys learn to become good friends with each other. You all are each other's Dhamma teachers. Thank you, Parker, for all of the kind work that you're doing too. I really appreciate it. Parker's the one who actually is doing the most. In fact, yesterday I uploaded 26 videos for him to put on YouTube. So thank you guys. I very much appreciate all the work and all the help you're giving. And may you guys gain great benefit from your happy, joyful friendships that you're developing.
Yes.
Thank
Great
you
to
for
see you
showing us
guys.
the way.
This is really great.
It's good to see you guys too, as always.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya. Ciao.
Bye, Parker.